This video is an audio-only commentary. See the description for the complete version if you want to actually see stuff. The complete experience, if you will. Let me put this out there right now. Madoka Magica is my favorite anime. It's the only one I've given perfect 10s across the board to. But these movies aren't that great. But you may be saying, but Draconis, they're like the same thing as a TV series. Exactly! That's the fucking problem! Honestly, there's no point in actually doing an in-depth review of these movies since they're almost exactly the fucking same as a TV series. So this will be more of a comparison between the movies and the TV show, seeing what was changed and determining whether or not these changes were for the better. And in case you're retarded, that means there will be spoilers for the TV anime. And if you've seen the TV anime, you've practically already seen these movies, so you don't have to worry about spoilers. The opening sequence in these movies has Yuri bait between Madoka and Homura that's clearly there strictly for the purpose of fueling the fetishes of mouth breathers who want so badly for there to actually be some kind of romance between them. You can put on Yuri goggles and pretend that there are Yuri undertones all you want, but anyone who thinks there are legitimate Yuri undertones in Madoka Magica is a fucking idiot. The pairing of these two characters was just so popular among the fandom that Shaft thought it would be profitable to pander to the mouth breathers who shipped them. Shaft has just been doing a colossal amount of pandering in general as of late. The omission of the dream sequence that was initially at the beginning of the first episode completely threw off the mood. It's actually amazing how much of a difference its omission made. Without it, the opening scenes make Madoka Magica look like an incredibly generic anime. It makes the darker toned and foreboding soundtracks sound incredibly out of place. Then, Madoka starts talking about having seen Homura in her dream the night before just like she did in the TV series, and it makes so much less sense because we didn't actually see that scene. It took a long time to get into what was happening due to this huge disconnect. Other important things are cut too, like Mommy's little backstory. She wasn't the most developed character ever to begin with, so cutting that out is too much. She dies in about 2 episodes time, as opposed to 3 as in the TV series, so I don't spend as much time with her. She also feels a lot more pious than she did in the TV series, and I'm sure this can also be attributed to the reduced time frame. Most of what's cut is from the earlier episodes. There are several little things that are cut out too. One such thing is when Kyubey stated that he can relay people's thoughts, so when Madoka and Sayaka, still not having become magical girls, start communicating telepathically with each other, it makes no sense. All of these cuts really snowball and hurt the movie significantly. That's what happens when you try to stuff approximately 176 minutes of material into a roughly 120-minute movie. Most of the things that were cut out are concentrated around the first half of the movie, and it really wasn't until things settled down that I could get immersed in the events that were transpiring on the screen. But once it hit its stride, it was about as engaging as a TV series was. But that took way too long. The touch-ups to the art are mostly pretty nice, though almost all of them are completely trivial. They added more detail to the scenery around them, and more intermediary shots of the cityscape and whatnot. They kind of made the city feel less abstract and more lived in. I particularly loved the touch-ups to the roof scene, and the sidewalk where they're walking to school. But sometimes it goes overboard, like Yosuke's hospital room, where they just shoved a whole ton of pointless shit on the screen that just clutters up the scene. There's a lot of general busyness. Also, the random shots of the cityscape they toss in are sometimes timed poorly. In the TV series, they were used for silent transitions, but here, they're sometimes shoved in while important dialogue's going on. They pointlessly increased the length of the transformation scenes by like 5 times. I liked how brief they were in the TV series, but now they're just pointlessly long. There was also an incredibly awkward jump cut. The music placement is pretty bizarre. The music that plays preceding Mommy's death is extremely odd and kills the mood of the scene. There's another particularly noteworthy instance of outright soundtrack dissonance during the scene where Madoka is trapped and Sayaka comes to save her. Sayaka sounds more moe than before.
そんな運がいいだけだよ、きっと。そんな運がいいだけだよ、きっと。いいのかな？いいのかな？
What's the point in re-recording lines that were perfectly good as is? It's simple. Pandering. Their voices didn't sound moe enough, so Shaft decided to fix it. Good guy Shaft always worrying about what matters most. This movie is a lot better than Beginnings, though like Beginnings, the changes are still mostly superficial. It doesn't cut any content like Beginnings did at least, but the ways it padded the runtime were mostly trivial. They just shoved in the OP from the original TV anime out of nowhere for some retarded reason, with just some minor aesthetic changes to the sequence at the beginning. Its placement made it all the worse. It was shoehorned in right at the end of Homura's backstory. It was completely and utterly random. Other ways of padding the runtime are less random and more interesting at least. Again, there's no change to the plot or dialogue, but the imagery during the scene where Homura asks Kyubey if Kyoko could have saved Sayaka is intense. However, the transition into it is far too long, and the exit from the scene is just the same sequence as the transition into it, but reversed. And then, there's a scene immediately afterwards that's utterly pointless. It feels like they're just trying to pretend that they actually spent money on producing these movies. Actually, in hindsight, regardless of how visually impressive these two scenes are, they're incredibly out of place in the context of the settings of the rest of these movies. They look like they were ones that were just supposed to be in a supernatural horror movie or something, but somehow got lost and found their way in here, especially that second one. The music placement is a lot better than in the first movie. The songs fit their respective scenes much better. The lack of that initial scene from the very first episode is still leaving ripples in this movie. When the scene with the Walpurgis Night comes around during Homura's backstory, it doesn't feel like it's coming full circle. It's wholly less rewarding. Ultimately, these movies are pointless. They don't change anything important for the better or add content to the story. In fact, the changes are wholly worse due to squishing 176 minutes worth of content into a 120-minute movie, in the case of Beginnings. Some of the aesthetic changes are nice though. One of the only flaws I had with the animation in the TV show is how there were a couple of scenes where the characters were walking towards the screen, but looked like they were walking in place. They fixed that, but some changes are also for the worse, like needlessly cluttering scenes with shit. The music is a mixed bag just as the visuals are. Some of the added tracks are good and fit their scenes, while some are wholly bad and totally derail the mood. Madoka Magica's OST was already a masterpiece whose only flaw was the overplaying of the song Sis Puella Magica. The song definitely isn't bad by any means and always fit the scene in which it was used, but it was simply used too often. The only real improvement to the soundtrack was rectifying this repetition. However, the soundtrack dissonance elsewhere sure as fuck is more than enough to destroy this improvement. All in all, the improvements are canceled out by the negatives. The best thing I can say about these movies is that the visual improvements make them more conducive to AMVs. That's about it. Let me draw a comparison with Rebuild of Evangelion. The Rebuild at least had significant improvements to offer in the visual department for Neon Genesis. NGE was 15 years old when the Rebuild first started coming out, so a revamp of the visuals was really warranted. Madoka Magica, however, wasn't even 2 years old by the time they shat these recap movies out. As a result, there's like nothing significant to contribute to the visual department. Some of the changes are nice, sure, but nothing significant. Also, the Rebuilds pushed the story in a different direction, albeit very badly, but at least it wasn't just the exact same thing copy and pasted verbatim. I was hoping these movies would be doing something more like that. Start out the same way that the TV show did, but then somehow change the direction it took. These movies aren't doing that. With Rebellion, they're just tacking something on to the end of a story that's already as closed can be. Urobuchi didn't even intend for there to be a sequel when he was writing the show. The way he wrapped it up was nice and clean and Rebellion couldn't ever hope to beat it. Which begs the question, what can Rebellion possibly hope to add? I think the answer is pretty obvious. Nothing. These movies are only being made to milk the franchise. There was already closure on every front. Rebellion will undoubtedly shit on the characters and everything they accomplished more than anything. Sayaka's gone, can't do anything with her. Bringing Madoka back will destroy the significance of her sacrifice, but it looks probable that that will happen, simply to appease those who desperately ship Madoka x Homura. The previews show Madoka coming down and meeting Homura in a field or some shit. If she can just reincarnate, there was no point making a big drama out of the fact that she wouldn't be able to be seen again or interacted with anymore, even though she's still around. Homura was pretty happy at the end of the series, but the trailers make her look incredibly emo, probably to force the pairing by making their reunion look necessary. Leave canon alone and leave the Yuri bullshit for the fan art. The previews mention stuff about Hitomi. There are 3 magical girls left, Homura, Kyoko, and Mami. None of them have any relation to Hitomi at all. Surely you see where I'm going with this. Basically, I don't have any hope that Rebellion will be good at all. There might be some cool action, I guess, but action is hardly an excuse for shitting on the legacy of the characters, and the story that was already tied neatly closed. These movies are a very shameless and particularly lazy cash grab, courtesy of Shaft. The minor technical changes are just there to hide this fact, and make it look like they're actually doing something. You're better off just watching the TV show, as the pacing is better, the writing is better, and these movies aren't strictly better on the technical side of things anyways. Some of the changes are for the better, while many are for the worse. The more I think about these movies, the worse they become. It's like that phrase regarding the government. If it ain't broke, fix it till it is.